So I have a confession to make. In case you did not watch my previous video, I talked about the possibility of SteamOS being obsolete soon due to Microsoft releasing an updated version of Windows OS later on this year, in which they claimed to provide a better user experience for gaming on Windows on a PC handheld. And I am just extremely sorry for saying that. I really underestimated the benefits of SteamOS. I was so caught up with the fact that a lot of multiplayer games that don't work on SteamOS due to anti-cheat, and I totally blew that fact out of proportion. I was not being considerate with the fact that many of you who use SteamOS love SteamOS and straight up do not want to use Windows at all costs. Because now that I think about it, if you were somebody who really cared about multiplayer games and where you are bummed that you would not be able to play them on SteamOS, you would have already switched to Windows already. And so I'm just really sorry for that. I was not objective with my previous discussion video. I was not genuine at all and did not acknowledge any of the work that Valve put into making SteamOS a better place for gamers. I did not regard with all the people that put their heart and mind to make those different plugins to make games run at a better experience using SteamOS. So I am just really sorry that I was not objective with my previous discussion video and that I did not see things from all angles. So with that being said, I take the blame. It is my fault. I screwed up. But if you are somebody who is still around and still are willing to give me a chance, I promise you that from now on, I will do my best to carefully plan out my topics, carefully do my research to get the most objective stance without biases or any sort of controversial issues. I will do so to my best effort, whether it is, game reviews, whether it is gaming discussions, or whether it is gaming lists, whatever content that is gonna be for Nomadic Gaming Guild, I will do my best to be as sincere and genuine as possible. So to patch up the holes that I had with the previous discussion video about SteamOS potentially being game over, I did my research carefully, as well as reflected on the past 3 years in which I've been using SteamOS and how much Valve has been pouring into the gaming community. And I will say that after reflecting on this, doing the research and whatnot, I now come to the conclusion that this community is strong and that SteamOS is still a great option. As long as you don't care about, multiplayer and the anti-cheat stuff, as long as you don't really play those games, the massive MMOs, it really feels as if SteamOS is not bad. SteamOS is very optimal. A lot of the major games all run pretty decent on SteamOS, and I will say it is really awesome. Like for instance, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. The Steam Deck OLED, when I cap it at 45 frames per second and running it at 90 Hz refresh rate with default settings, I get in between high 30s to 40s frames per second while roaming around town and while in combat, so it is really solid, as well as it also gives me about 3 hours of battery life. Another game that I would say that runs decently well is Stellar Blade. As far as Stellar Blade goes, when I capped my Steam Deck OLED to 45 frames per second and running at 90 Hz refresh rate with default settings, I get a solid 45 frames per second at certain areas, as well as some other areas I get the high 30s to 40s frames per second, and where I was also able to maintain 2.5 hours of battery life. Now another game that I want to note is Spider-Man 2. Now as far as Spider-Man 2 goes, even though the game struggles to maintain a reasonable playability situation on the Steam Deck in which it dips into the 20s frames per second constantly while also going to the low 30s frames per second, and where Spider-Man 2 gets a battery life of about 2 hours on the Steam Deck OLED. So though not too optimal with Spider-Man 2, at least on the Steam Deck OLED, I feel like if it is using a hardware and running SteamOS that is more powerful than the Steam Deck OLED by a good chunk, then it should be able to run the game at a reasonable frames per second. That is, if you are somebody who is okay to run games in the 30-ish range of frames per second. Now as far as older games as well as the less demanding games goes, they all all run perfectly fine with SteamOS for the most part, even on the Steam Deck as well, no matter if it's the Steam Deck OLED or the LCD. For instance, with Hades, okay, on the Steam Deck OLED, where I cap it at 90 frames per second and 90 Hz refresh rate, Hades was able to run at a solid 90 frames per second and maintain 3 hours of battery life, and where on the LCD model, when having it capped at 60 frames per second at 60 Hz, it was able to run at a solid 60 frames per second and have 2 hours of battery life. So the thing is that as far as the games goes with SteamOS, as long as you are not into games that don't run on SteamOS, then you should be fine. You will not be disappointed. And since SteamOS is readily available all across the board for other PC handhelds like the ROG Ally X or the Lenovo Legion Go, which are more powerful than both the Steam Deck OLED as well as the Steam Deck LCD. So worst come to worst, if it is a game that does not run well on the Steam Deck, a lot of times it may be due to the Steam Deck's old hardware, and you could just get a more powerful handheld PC and install SteamOS on it. You will be a happy gamer. Now that I touched base on a few major games that run on SteamOS, I want to transition into talking about things I am grateful for after using SteamOS throughout these years. And the first thing in which I want to talk about is the awesome customer service that I experienced. And that comes down to the creator of Steam, aka Valve. As far as Valve goes, I had nothing but great experience with Valve. There were times when I had to return a game for whatever reason, either due to me simply not liking the game or due to it having bugs after playing it for a few hours, in which I barely just passed the window of the 2 hours, and where Valve still happily accommodated me and gave me a full refund. And also at the time when I bought my Steam Deck OLED, when I opened up the box and everything, I realized that the Steam Deck OLED had some major imperfections in which it looks as if it got damaged prior to shipping, and where I requested a refund, took some pictures about the damage on the Steam Deck, and where Valve happily responded saying that they will quickly send me a replaced unit, and within a week I got delivered another Steam Deck OLED which was in perfect condition. So what I'm saying is that since Valve is a really friendly and pro-consumer company, SteamOS is in very good hands, okay, since SteamOS is also under Valve. So that is something to note, that with Valve investing on SteamOS, investing on Proton, and caring about the consumers, that is a corporation in which I personally will want to continue to support and be a part of. And what better way is to continue using SteamOS, especially for me. So yeah. Now, as far as side features that I really love about SteamOS, there are quite a few. I love the quick suspense feature where you boot up a game, play it for a while, and then where when you're done with playing the game, even if you don't exit the game and you just power down your Steam Deck and later on decide to power it on, the game automatically boots up to the place where you just left off, and you get to continue on playing with the game as if you had not stopped at all and had not powered down the Steam Deck. I feel like that is a really great feature that I thank Valve every day, because for PC handhelds, one major thing that is really important with it is the ability to quickly pick it up and drop it whenever. And so having this feature is really helpful so that you can quickly, exit your game session and come back without worrying about losing progress and whatnot. Now, as far as SteamOS goes, I will also say that, I am also thankful that Valve continues to make updates for Proton, and where games just continue to get more optimized from time to time, and there are some games where they used to not run as well, they start to run better thanks to Valve having that update. And another thing that I am glad with Valve where they updated SteamOS was to make this feature where you can lock your battery to only charge to a certain percent, where let's say if you just want your Steam Deck to charge to 80% as opposed to 100%, then you can set it to where it just charges to 80% and then it just stops there, which is something that I heard is really good because it helps with the longevity of the battery. It helps the battery to last longer and not wear out. So that is something that I heard as well. And last but not least, I'm also glad that there are plenty of people who invest on SteamOS. The gaming community is just really friendly and really caring to make sure that the SteamOS users like you and me are well taken care of. For instance, even though I felt that lossless scaling is not for every single game, but at the same time, I'm thankful that there are people out there who made lossless scaling possible to run on SteamOS, as well as I'm also glad that there are also these other plugins that are made, like ProtonDB badges, where you can get a more accurate information about game compatibility on Linux based on other people who report on that, and where they also give a descriptive step on how to run a game if it requires a lot of tinkering. So that is something that I am really grateful for. But to wrap this video up, I just want to really say that I am really sorry for not taking into consideration all these benefits that make SteamOS so amazing. I was just so hung up with the fact that a lot of multiplayer games, due to anti-cheat software, don't run on SteamOS, to jump into the conclusion that SteamOS is not a viable option moving forward. I'm really sorry for that, and it is something in which I will from now on do my best to look at things at every single angle before conducting a discussion video, and make sure that every side is talked about, even though I may not agree with every single point. And that is something that's really important, and I really want to continue to make Nomadic Gaming Guild as a place where gamers who love all sorts of games, who love to explore different games and experience different games, hence it's called Nomadic Gaming Guild, because you are like a gaming nomad. So that is what I really hope to build, this type of community and culture, and I'm just really sorry I did not do my best to be objective and authentic as possible. So we'll make sure that does not happen again, and if you still love my content, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe so you'll not miss another video. I try to post Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific time and occasionally on Fridays, so stay tuned. Once again, my name is Joanne for the Nomadic Gaming Guild, and game on!